So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to demo color gel photography, but specifically we're going to talk about color harmonies. So how colors can play well together, how to choose colors that work well together in gels. I'm going to talk about how to make the colors saturated, and I'm going to do a little bit of lecture, and then we are going to photograph my beautiful model and friend Ashley, so you can see these in real life in practice. So where we're actually going to begin is going to be a little bit of sciencey theory stuff, and then we'll move on to a little bit more of the practical art stuff. Okay, so how we're going to start is talking about the color of light. Specifically, have you ever seen these before? These overlapping colors, so RGB and CMYK. When it comes to paint, pigment, what happens if you mix a bunch of colors together? You keep just adding a bunch of colors. As you do so, it builds to usually kind of like an ugly brown, almost black, right? You don't really have much control over that color. But what happens is when you mix many different colors of light together, it actually builds towards white. So specifically, what these are saying to you is if you mix RGB together, this is called additive color. And when you mix RGB light together, it gives you white. But on the other hand, if you look over, do you see where there's RGB, so red, green, and blue on the CMYK color wheels over there? If you see that, it actually, RGB gives you black. And so additive is adding together to give you white. Subtractive is taking away to give you black. It's taking away light. So the reason this is going to become useful with color gel photography is when you're trying to change the color of a background. If you're used to painting or mixing colors, it doesn't work the same. It works totally different. So I bring up the additive where these overlap. I bring this up and I look at it when I am playing with gels because my brain is wired towards pigment. And so it actually helps me a little bit. So, here's the illustration of them. But this is what that knowledge can give you. In this photo, and I'm going to show you a compressed version of this, in this photo I am using 3 lights. And all 3 of the lights have a gel on them, RGB. So I have red, green, and blue, but do you see how the background is white? The light on her face is white? It's because they add up to give you white. But then you'll also notice, I just said I was using red, green, and blue. I'm not using magenta, and I'm not using cyan. I'm not using yellow. But you can see it in the shadows behind her. And that's because if you look at it, if you're looking at where those colors overlap, where the red and green mix together, that's what's giving you the yellow. So you're seeing yellow in the shot, even though I'm not using a yellow gel, because of how those colors interact. So it's something I recommend, like set up a mannequin or a vase or something that's not moving and just play around with this. Like take 3 light sources, and it doesn't have to be strobes. It could literally be a flashlight. And if you do the exact same thing, Roscoe has those little gel sample kits, if you've ever seen them, where it has every color. You could take those, tape them on the front of a flashlight, and achieve the same exact idea. So you can see it in practice. So one of the things I wanted to maybe illustrate, there we go, demonstrate to you is red and green, when it comes to light, gives you yellow. But if you're mixing pigment, that's not what would happen. So this is why I'm saying you have to kind of wire your head a little bit differently when you're thinking about colors in the realm of lighting. So just search additive lighting, brings it up, keep that with you when you're playing with gels. Now let's talk about actual gels themselves. So you can see I've got gels on the front of my strobes here. They're a specific type. So gels come in 2 main categories. The first category is the practical category, which is color correction, which you guys may have used. Maybe you go on location and there's like a lot of tungsten light in the space and you want to neutralize it. So then you might grab like a CTO. What that allows you to do is take your light, if you bring an artificial light on location, and warm it up. So now everything in the space is tungsten. And then you can set your camera to tungsten and it will neutralize things. Like that's color correction. I'm not talking about that today, but CTOs, CTBs, there's also ones that are magenta. The ones we are going to be using are what they call in cinematography party gels, because they're not rooted in anything practical. It's just fun. It looks beautiful, super saturated colors. This is one kit that's really nice, the Roscoe Cal color. It has a whole bunch of different colors, so it's a pretty big kit. The other one that I use is the Roscoe Color Effects kit. That's another good one. I don't remember how much this one costs. I think the Color Effects is just under $50. But if you do pick them up, I recommend that you get 2 kits. And the reason I recommend that is sometimes I'm using multiple gels and I want them to match. And so it'd be like, oh, I want the background light to be blue and the foreground, and then they're not the same color and you can tell. So just in case you're into it and want to pick one up, I'd pick up 2 matching kits. All right, so for talking about gels, why would you use a gel? Like, what's the purpose of it? We're not going practical. We're going to talk all about creative. And the first reason is probably for mood, like creating an interesting mood in your images. You can cool things down, make them look mysterious. You can add warm reds and oranges, and it makes it fiery. It makes it sexy. That's one reason, just mood alone. The other reason for me, mostly in the realm of fashion photography, is I'm playing off of a color in the shot. She's wearing a red dress, so I want to complement that with a color on the background. Or the makeup is all purple, so I want to add purples and blues to the shadows, to the background, to the hair light, those sorts of things. So I'm taking what's in my scene and then amplifying it more. And then the other reason would be, especially for portraits, think like celebrity portraits, or maybe it's album covers or performers. It separates it from reality. Like when you all of a sudden have 5 lights and each one's a different color, it looks like they're on stage performing. So it allows you to get something with a little bit more creativity and polish. Those tend to be the 3 reasons that I introduce color gels that are not practical. So these are all examples of what I'm talking about, like really super saturated gels, hardly any white light in the scene. These are the sorts of images that I like to create. And so believe it or not, that picture on the left, the woman with the green gels in her hair and the blue, that's similar to the reference that the pharmaceutical company reached out to me about. And it doesn't look anything like I would envision. My portfolio is not filled with pharmaceutical, but they saw that lighting and go, that's actually what we're looking for. That's the vibe of what we want. Has our brand colors, has the moodiness, those sorts of things. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about how to pick your colors, though. All right, I have to do it, though. If you want to learn more on gels, I got more. I got a 3-hour class and a lighting guide. So there. Okay, now. All right. So when I think about using gels, I try to encourage people to think of what you're trying to achieve in the shot, rather than just throw a bunch of colors together, because when you do that, it does look haphazard. It doesn't look as refined. It looks like someone playing with gels, which, I mean, there's nothing wrong with playing with gels, but I'm saying in your end shot, if you think of color theory and color harmonies, it looks more refined. You look more professional because you went in with a purpose and you achieved that by your color of gel choice. So this is true with anything in photography. I encourage people to come to a shoot with a concept. Everything has to work together. When I know what I'm trying to achieve, it's like, okay, the lighting, the makeup, the background, the clothing, the posing, like all of it works together. Am I going for something strong and bold? You'll see that in the makeup, in the way that the subject is giving me their body language. You'll see it in the colors. Or is it meant to be subdued, more desaturated colors, softer poses? So as with anything, there's no right or wrong answer, which is tough when you teach. It's like, hey, well, what should you do? Well, it all can work if it works, right? So in the end, whatever you choose, if it's effective in the image, it's effective, and don't let anyone teach you any rules. But the rules make it easier to make decisions. So we're gonna talk about some of those. So specifically, I want to talk just a little bit about color theory. There is a free website that I use nonstop, color.adobe.com. Go there. Like I said, it's free. It's an interactive color wheel. I find this insanely useful because when I am working with color gels, you can pick a single color. Let's say I know the model is wearing a blue dress. And then I'm like, all right, well, what do I want to add for gel? So what colors should I introduce in my scene? What colors should I do in the makeup? if you go to this color wheel, you can actually go through a bunch of different color theories, different color harmonies, and it's telling me what would work with that blue. So for example, here, let's just say that I pick that color blue, and on the left-hand side, do you see where it says color harmony? I'm going to go to monochromatic. So what a monochromatic color scheme is that everything is the same hue. Hue is what we think of color. Like that's the word we use. Specifically, when you break down color, it's more than hue. It's you actually have your saturation. So how rich is that color? How pure is that color? And then you have your luminance, luminosity, brightness, right? How bright is that color? But we're talking about hue here. So if I go there and I pick monochromatic, it's like, okay, one way you could use blue in your scene would be to do more blue. I could do a blue dress, blue fill to the shadows, a blue background, blue makeup. That would be monochromatic. But then the next one that's on there is probably the one I use more often, which is called an analogous color scheme. Those are colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. Basically, it's monochromatic, but you expand it. It just gives you more flexibility. But we see analogous color schemes in nature. We see it in, like you go into a forest, right? And it's just all different saturations and hues of yellows and greens next to each other. Or, okay, it's getting cold here in New York, so let's be tropical beach, okay? You got the blue sky and the teals and blues of the water and the cyan. It's analogous. Because of that, it tends to be peaceful. Gives you a little bit more range of color, but they're all next to each other. There isn't a lot of contrast there. So this is telling me, all right, I could do kind of green, blue. I could even go maybe a little bit into like purples. Or I could go over here. I still got blue, but it goes blue, purple, pink into magenta. So you can kind of rotate it around and it'll be like, oh, you could do cooler colors with that blue. Or I could start to do a little bit warmer colors with the blue. And then I'll give you one more to start off with here. Next one, of course, the last one here is complementary. So complementary is across from each other on the color wheel, which creates contrast, it creates pop, it creates tension in your image. Like it is supposed to create tension, but it works together and it balances each other nicely. So monochromatic, all the same hue. Analogous, hues next to each other. And then complementary, opposite for contrast. So this is what I use because I look at it and go, okay, so I could use a yellow to create that contrast. So to go back now to our presentation, I'm going to show you a couple examples of this before we demo. Let's just see some of these in action. Okay, so here's some examples. This one is a monochromatic color scheme, and I shot this with one light outdoors. I actually had her bathed in sunlight. She's in hard light, directly in the sun, and then I cooled down my white balance to make everything go really blue, and the background was blue. And then I filled in the shadows with a B10 Plus and a blue gel. So everything in that photo is blue. Now to expand on that, analogous, colors next to each other. I've got my magenta, reds, yellows, oranges, everything is that like warm, fiery color. Another example is this makeup was inspired by a goldfish. And so we decided to go with goldfish colors. But everything is oranges and yellows. And then you can see that different color theories give you very different effects. So complementary on the left, red and green, right? It's Christmas colors. But when you use them kind of more desaturated or more subtle, it's not like it screams Christmas to me. But you'll notice that outline, how much does that outline pop against her? Because it is the complement. Whereas in the analogous, I'm using kind of blues and teals, and so it's all just next to each other. It's a little quieter, not as much contrast. So you can see kind of how I'm making some of my decisions. All right, I want to give you one more complicated one, but it's not that complicated. Remember how I said analogous is next to each other? Complementary is across? You can combine those and have split complementary. So what it means is you can have a few colors next to each other, like blue, teal, cyan, and then you pick the color opposite, which in this case was a kind of yellow-orange. So what it does is it lets you have more than just complementary colors. It expands it a little bit and then allows you to have that contrast pop. Those are the ones that I use. There are more color harmonies than this, but monochromatic, analogous, complementary, or split complementary. Those are the 4 that you'll see in my work endlessly. So I think we can demo some. All right. All right, so a couple things. I'll just run you through some gear. I'm using ProPhoto B10 Pluses here. They're the